The Democrats have allowed themselves to become the party that stood in almost uniform behind child sex changes across America.
That's just not true.
I'm sorry, I can explain it in 30 seconds how true it is.
I made a Democratic CNN star snap live on air when I pointed out the extremism on trans issues that's infected her party. We're going to break this down and so much more on today's episode of the Barad versus Everyone podcast, my daily show where we take on the craziest ideas from across the internet, our media, and our politics, all from an independent perspective. Thank you guys for the outpouring of love and support that I've gotten from y'all and the enormous numbers on yesterday's podcast because of my CNN clip that's going viral with Anna Navarro, where she dismissed me for being a white man. I really appreciate the support and the publicity. You know, it's funny. I was on the phone with somebody dear to me afterwards who was very upset. How could she speak to you like that? That's so nasty to dismiss someone for their race. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. She just gave me a gift. She just gave me a gift by doing that. And overall, thrilled with the experience and can't wait to go back on that very interesting, very entertaining show with Abby Phillip. CNN Newsnight, 10 p.m. Eastern. We broke down most of the highlights from my appearance yesterday, but there is one more clip that I haven't circulated yet that I want to show you guys, where one of the issues that is near and dear to my heart, and you'll know if you've been with me for very long on this channel and on this show, is the issue of protecting minors from irreversible, unsupported, experimental transition treatments. And it's one of the issues that I think has alienated a lot of people from the Democratic Party. And so when I brought that up, I was expecting pushback, but I wasn't quite expecting the level of denial that I encountered from one of my fellow panelists. Maria Cardona, who, to be clear, was lovely, very nice, great chat with, but I did strongly disagree with her on this, and we had what I thought was an important exchange. Take a listen to that.
Obama's falling into the messaging trap. The issue for Democrats is not just the messaging. A lot of them seem to think that, well, if we just got the messaging right, America would love our ideas. Actually, no, a lot of their ideas are deeply unpopular. The Democrats have allowed themselves to become the party that stood in almost uniform behind child sex changes across America.
That's just not true.
I'm sorry, I can explain it in 30 seconds how true it is. Joe Biden brought Dylan Mulvaney to the White House for an interview talking about how important it was to keep those procedures legal in all 50 states. Every Democrat, after the recent Supreme Court decision, almost every Democrat in Washington put out a statement decrying it, that states would dare regulate puberty blockers being given to 11 or 12-year-olds. On the border, on inflation, there are many issues where it's not a messaging issue. The policy is also the problem for Democrats.
So what I would say is that on that piece, that is not true. Democrats did not campaign on that. Did Democrats defend the dignity of the LGBTQ, including the trans community? Yes, and they will continue to do that. What I will say, what I will say is that Republicans totally used that issue, completely weaponized, lying about what Kamala was running on, lying about what Democrats were lying on, and they did it brilliantly, and we didn't fight back enough.
I think they were
that
nasty.
absolutely is
I think
true.
they were toxic
now,
in their rhetoric, but it wasn't,
I also
it wasn't
will
a
say,
lie.
and what
the
you
underlying claim
and what
is
you
not a lie.
see,
You know, not to toot my own horn, but I'm going to toot my own horn a little. I kind of cooked. I kind of ate. Like, I'm very happy with how this came out. I'm very happy with my performance on the show. Yeah, I'll say it. And look, once again, we chatted about this yesterday as well, read some of the highlights. I don't ever just say shit. I don't ever just make claims that I haven't researched, that I haven't backed up, that I don't have receipts for. And she fell into my trap when I said, give me 30 seconds and I will prove this. I did, but I actually want to show you a little bit more in depth the receipts, because obviously that was kind of narrowly constrained in the timeline there. But if you actually are arguing in 2025 that Democrats have not stood in support of access to minors medically transitioning, you're either hopelessly misinformed and just out of the loop, or you're like gaslighting us, because they so very obviously have. I mean, this was actually really a defining controversial policy of the Biden administration, where they openly embraced this deeply radical, deeply divisive position, even, as I mentioned, having Dylan Mulvaney at the White House.
Mr. President, this is my 221st day of publicly transitioning.
God love you.
Thank you. I am extremely privileged to live in a state that allows me access to the resources I need, and that decision is just between me and my doctors. But many states have lawmakers that feel like they can involve themselves in this very personal process. Do you think states should have a right to ban gender-affirming health care?
I don't think any state or anybody should have the right to do that. As a moral question and as a legal question. I just think it's wrong. There's a lot of, sometimes they try to block you from being able to access certain medicines, being able to access certain procedures and so on. None of that should be available. I mean, no state should be able to do that in my view. So I feel very, very strongly that you should have every single solitary right, including use of your gender identity bathrooms in public.
But it's not just Dylan Mulvaney or this one interview, or it's not even just Joe Biden. It is almost every elected Democrat in Congress that is so beholden to the progressive flank, or so frankly scared of some of these LGBT activist groups, that they've hopped on the train and endorsed this lunacy. I want to read you guys, this is The Hill's reporting here. Democrats urge Supreme Court to strike down Tennessee gender-affirming care ban. This is from 2024 about the big U.S. Supreme Court case that was recently handed down, but this was when it was being argued. This is a reporting from Brooke Migden. More than 160 House and Senate Democrats on Tuesday called on the Supreme Court to protect access to gender-affirming health care for transgender minors by striking down a Tennessee law that bans treatment for youths younger than 18 when the justices review the law this fall. Now, in the actual case, the justices did not do that. They upheld states' ability to regulate the practice. I did a whole episode breaking that decision down if you want to go back and check it out. But I'll read you a few names that signed on to this brief, imploring on the Supreme Court to keep access to medical transitions for minors in place. Nancy Pelosi, the former Speaker of the House and a Democratic celebrity. Hakeem Jeffries, the new Democratic Speaker of the House. Bernie Sanders, one of the leaders of the party. Intellectually, Elizabeth Warren, one of the most prominent faces from the Democratic Senate caucus. You get the idea. Most prominent elected Democrats have been explicit that they support this, that they support minors transitioning. And most Americans think that is a barbaric, extreme, radical, and indefensible view. Here's a clip of Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, who also signed this letter, speaking about this issue.
Today, the Supreme Court ruled 6-3 that Tennessee's SB 1, a ban on gender-affirming care for people under 18, can stand. This is a ruling that is putting a cruel and politically motivated policy over the lives of people. It puts the government between doctors and their patients in Tennessee, and it says that the legislature knows better than a medical professional or a parent. I am proud to be the co-chair of the Trans Equality Task Force in Congress and to be the sponsor of the Transgender Bill of Rights. I am never backing down from this fight.
So I don't mind debating the issue. I've hosted debates on it in the past. I participated in conversations about it. But please do not deny reality to my face and tell me that what we all witnessed, what we all saw, what we all lived through isn't real and never happened. I don't appreciate that, and I will bring the receipts and cook you if I have to. The other point is that, well, Democrats didn't campaign on it. Sort of true in that they didn't accentuate their positions, but they were on because they have proven to be so unpopular. They maybe didn't talk about it at campaign events as much. They de-emphasized it for sure, but that was more a matter of political marketing. They never came out and said, Kamala never, ever, 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 ever. I will wait. I'll sit and wait for Maria or anyone else on the internet to come back and show me a clip of Kamala Harris saying that procedures for minors and hormone treatments and puberty blockers should be banned. If you can find it, I will do a whole episode apologizing to Kamala Harris and reading it and citing it and saying how deeply wrong I was, I really will. But you can't find it because it doesn't exist. They took all these radical positions a few years ago and then quietly de-emphasized them, but never actually changed the underlying position, never actually apologized, admitted they were wrong, or said they'd do something different in the future. If they did that, maybe I would be willing to just move on and let it go, but they didn't. And in blue states, they are fighting like hell to keep transitioning minors. Some of them are even declaring themselves sanctuary states for medically transitioning kids, which is really, really shocking and radical stuff, and is just a reality. No matter how badly they want to deny it, facts are facts, and facts are stubborn things sometimes. That personally was my favorite exchange because I didn't really mean to, but I baited her perfectly. And then when she tried to deny it, I had the receipts and I ate down. I really did. At least that's what I think. But you guys, you let me know what you think in the comments below. Do hit that like button while you're at it. Make sure you're subscribed if you aren't yet. Remember, guys, you can also listen to the Brad versus Everyone podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts. Would love to have you with us on the road, on the go, when you don't have time to sit down and watch my beautiful face. So please do sign up over there if you aren't yet. And remember, send in your voice notes for Voicemail Friday. It's my episodes where I take voice notes from you guys and hear about your woke horror stories, your personal life scenarios, or just answer any questions you guys have for me. The link to send in one of those is in the description. Also, guys, don't forget, we have an awesome merch item line that my boyfriend worked very hard on, so go check that out, linked in the description as well. Now, Sesame Street. There's more drama on Sesame Street. We're going to talk about another story involving the frickin' Sesame Street cast, apparently. If you had gone back to me as a young reporter in DC after graduating college, covering campaigns in the Democratic 2020 presidential primary, and told me in a few years you'll be yapping about Elmo multiple times in a week and people will love it and eat it up and that will be your career, I would have thought you were like trolling me. But here we are. And you know what? I kind of love it. I'm here for it. So a radical left-wing activist named Robert Reich, who has become kind of a progressive influencer and even YouTuber of some popularity, has put out a bizarre, truly bizarre propaganda video using Elmo and Sesame Street to attack President Trump in some pretty extreme terms. Let's take a look at that.
Why is Trump trying to fire you?
Well, Elmo thinks it could maybe because Mr. Trump is mad at Sesame Street for making fun of him.
I'm Donald Trump, and I have more trash than all of you, so yeah.
But trying to cancel Sesame Street, which has helped children learn to read and count for over half a century, is part of a larger plan. Trump is waging a war on the American mind. Throughout history, tyrants have understood that their major enemy is an educated public. Slaveholders prohibited enslaved people from learning to read. The Third Reich burned books. The Khmer Rouge banned music. Stalin and Pinochet censored the media. And Trump, like past authoritarians, wants to control not just what we do, but also how we think.
Wow. So I feel like I just got blasted with a water hose of propaganda, misinformation, and hysteria. What do you mean? Trump trying to fire or cancel Elmo? That is not a thing. Trump is trying to defund different public broadcasting, NPR, PBS, and the likes of all of that. But that does not mean that Elmo will be canceled or anything of this sort, because according to Fortune magazine, only about 4% of Sesame Street's funding is federal, and they just started a new partnership with Netflix, which can certainly afford to pick up 4% slack in their budget. And regardless, listen, I have nothing against Sesame Street. I'm not out here, waging war against it. But if people love it so much, they can fund it, right? If donors want to support it, please pick up your checkbook and do so. But taxpayers don't necessarily need to. And even if you disagree with me and you disagree with Trump on this issue, that's fine. We could discuss, is this a good use of taxpayer dollars? Is it not? It's not like literally Hitler, though. It's not like literally slavery. Like, it's just the alarmism and hysteria is off the charts for me. What do you mean? Removing taxpayer funding for some forms of public broadcasting is waging war on the American mind. Like, all this stuff will be out there. People can still publish, read, create whatever they want. You don't have a divine right to have it funded by taxpayers, though, to make your neighbors pay for it. There is such a thing as free will. There is such a thing as crowdfunding and charity and all these ways that if you provide a service that's actually valuable, people will pay for it. People will support it. And people like Robert Reich should be a lot less quick to just vote and spend away and demand everyone else's money against their will. And maybe, just maybe, donate some of their own. And you just have absolutely lost the plot when you are comparing removing 4% of Sesame Street's funding to the Nazis, slaveholders, to banning books, to banning people from learning to read, to banning music, to some of the worst dictators in human history. You have absolutely lost the plot, sir. And you need to take your medication, because I don't know what you're on, but those things are not comparable. And it's actually gross to minimize the horrors of those historical evils by so casually invoking them over the most minor things. And it's also a huge part of why we are where we are, where Trump actually does do crazy and say and do crazy stuff sometimes, and probably doesn't get the pushback for it that he deserves or the scrutiny from his own base, because progressives and liberal media have literally just called everything Nazi, sexist, racist, fascist, authoritarian, blah, 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 for so long. They diluted these words of their meaning. They are the boy who cried wolf, or the they, them who cried wolf at this point. And now, I mean, it says something that, like, a totally normal thing any Republican president would do will still get compared to Nazis and slaveholders. Like, seriously? Serious. I don't know how we get back from this kind of deranged discourse. And I do worry about where it takes our country, right? People believe this stuff and they genuinely get afraid and they get radical and they get violent. It's actually disgusting. What do you guys think? Have you encountered Robert Reich's content before? Are you a fan of his? Do you agree that removing 4% of Sesame Street's funding is akin to the Nazis or slaveholders? Let me know in the comments. Up next, we're going to cover a spat between California Governor Gavin Newsom, who is a Democrat and a potential presidential candidate in 2028, and the far-right Twitter account and influencer Haya Rychik, aka Libs of TikTok, because they are having an exchange right now that I think, I mean, really everyone comes out looking terrible, but even on the core level, though, as much as I dislike Gavin Newsom, I do try to be honest and fair. And Libs of TikTok, in my view, pretty blatantly lied about him. So first, I'm going to play you a clip of Gavin Newsom on the Sean Ryan podcast. Then I'm going to tell you how Libs of TikTok described the clip, and you tell me what you notice.
All these mixed status families, $8.5 billion of tax collection in California every year from undocs, $8.5 billion that we receive just at the state level of taxes. That was the last Pew estimate. So it's not insignificant. Backbone, I mean, it's half of our agriculture work. You care about farmers and ranchers? If that's what your number one go-to commitment, then you sure as hell should care about their workers. 41% of our construction workers, Texas and California have the highest percentage of their construction workers that would fall into that category. How the hell do we rebuild Altadena and Palisades? We're going to need a peak next year. We estimate about 70,000 workers. Without that workforce, ain't going to happen. You're struggling here. You imagine a peak there. So I think there needs to be a pathway for those folks as we secure the border, and we own that issue.
Do you feel that they're taking American jobs?
Not in Tulare County. Not in Ventura County. I don't know many people that want a job out there in those packing facilities. I don't see many people look like me jumping at those jobs. I just don't. Maybe there's some exceptions. I haven't seen the evidence of that.
So there are definitely legitimate ways to disagree with what Gavin Newsom is saying here, to push back on some of his points, to argue that, well, maybe Americans would do those jobs if they offered higher wages. I've heard people make that argument, and all of that is fine. We can have that debate. But what he's talking about is the fact that undocumented workers, illegal immigrants, play a huge role in California's labor force and in very important industries. And if you just deport them all, the way that many Republicans and the Trump administration say they would like to do, you will cause huge economic problems for everyone. Now, again, disagree with that, but don't lie about what he said when we have the video. Here's what Libs of TikTok wrote. Gavin Newsom defends criminal illegal aliens, says they're the backbone of California's economy. And remember, guys, this is a very influential account with more than 4 million followers that kind of everyone in right-wing media looks to, Republican politicians follow. One, I mean, the Gavin Newsom thing is just, I don't really appreciate that kind of political style of commentary, but whatever, where you're just needlessly rude. But Newsom was very clearly in that clip not talking about criminal illegal aliens, so which refers to illegal immigrants who come here and then commit crimes. That's a very specific term that refers to, thieves and rapists and murderers and the kind of people that you want to prioritize for deportation. That is very explicitly not who he was talking about. He's talking about undocumented laborers who pay taxes, which they do at the state and local level, and who contribute to the economy, which, whether you want to deport them or not, it's a fact that they currently do. So to blatantly mischaracterize him like that is just dishonest, and I would say the same about any politician in any scenario, yet it's going mega viral, and everybody's like, oh, she owned him. She really didn't. She just lied. Now, Gavin Newsom's official press office responded and said, no, that is not what the governor said. The governor said undocumented Californians, and the fact that you can't tell the difference between hardworking immigrants and dangerous criminals, your racism is showing. In fact, the governor talks about coordinating between CDCR and ICE for dangerous criminals shortly before this clip, fairly deceiving video cut. Not that we're surprised. And in that clip, Gavin Newsom says, I'm with you on the criminals. So look, as much as I'm not a fan of the guy, I'm Team Newsom on this one. I think he's right. She's wrong. She totally cut him out of context. She totally mischaracterized what he said. And that's the exact same thing that many of us on the right have complained about liberal media doing to us, doing to Republicans for years. And now you have accounts like Libs of TikTok that basically just do the same thing in the opposite direction. I'm not a fan of that. I will never support that. And I do not think it contributes positively to our political discourse. But what do you guys think? Have you seen this exchange? Let me know in the comments. One final item I want to talk about is really, I worry about having kids someday and sending them to school and then sending them to a public school that is captured by these teachers' unions. Teachers' unions are supposed to advocate for the collective interests of teachers. And you would think that they would focus on education policy, local funding, how to improve student outcomes. But instead, at least according to new reporting from the Free Press, they are focused on national politics and resisting Trump. At least the largest teachers union in America, the NEA, National Education Association, is at their annual conference. Take a listen to this report from the Free Press's Maya Sulkin.
Okay, given the fact that 40% of American fourth graders cannot read at grade level, you'd think that the NEA, the world's largest teachers union, that at their annual convention, they would have a lot to talk about when it comes to reading and writing. Well, you're wrong. I spoke to a number of NEA union members who just got back from the NEA annual conference where they vote on resolutions for the year to come that help form teachers' curriculums. And it is basically all political. One teacher told me that when she asked to talk about reading and writing initiatives, one other delegate said to her, "We don't have time for that. We have to fight Trump." Here are some of the craziest initiatives that they passed. So there's a $3,500 initiative to defend democracy against Trump's embrace of fascism by using the term fascism in NEA materials to correctly characterize Donald Trump's program and actions. Another one approved support and participation in mass democratic movement against Trump's authoritarian violations of human rights. Another item is opposition to ICE kidnapping of student leaders and support for the students' rights to organize against ICE raids and deportation. This initiative protects students' right to free speech and defends their right to dissent and organize against Trump's policies, including attacks against LGBTQ+ students and racism. The resolutions and speeches coming out of the NEA convention sounded a lot more like a political agenda or rally than a serious meeting to talk about education in the US. One delegate from Texas told me that it's politics, sex, and gender. When delegates get up on stage, they tell you that they're political. These things did not just happen overnight, she told me. People have just not been paying attention. She told me one story of a friend of hers who got up on stage and asked to talk about reading and writing, and she was booed off of the stage. As literacy and math proficiency rates are plummeting, the teachers union, the largest one in the United States, is talking about how to fight Trump and not about how to address the serious problems in our education system. If you want to read more about the NEA and the resolutions they passed at this year's convention, you can read my story at thefp.com.
Well, shout out to Maya for this very interesting clip here, and I will link to her stories that you guys can go read and check it out. I will say this, though. We are so cooked. China is just eating our lunch on education. Other parts of the world are just destroying us. And the institutions and organizations, and I want to be clear also, when I talk about teachers unions and I criticize them, I am not criticizing teachers. I am not criticizing everyday teachers, who I believe most of whom want what's best for their students and are focused on this. But the people who are in charge of these unions are hyper politicized, deeply ideological and radical. And I won't say they don't care about students, but I will say that that's definitely not their only or their top priority. And that's why the stranglehold these groups have has to be broken. Really, I mean, there's an argument they shouldn't even be allowed to exist as public sector unions, but regardless, they certainly shouldn't be able to compel membership or compel dues as they were able to in the past. I think that's been rolled back. And this is another reminder of why I'm a big supporter of the school choice movement, because when you have public school systems as the only option for people in some areas, and those public schools are controlled or hijacked by these radical ideologues and activists masquerading as teachers and then seizing control of the teachers unions, you end up with failing students and you end up with generations being left behind. We saw this in COVID, where places with stronger teachers union representation and organizing stayed closed for longer, much longer, even though schools, that is, even though there wasn't evidence to support that as a public health measure, and even though it was so damaging and so detrimental for so many young people. And I just have to say this, like, if you are a teacher, you should be horrified that this is your representation, because a lot of Americans do see this stuff and hold teachers accountable for it, which I don't really think is fair, but is just kind of how it works. And you should also take interest and take note about which politicians wrap themselves in the arms of the teachers unions and campaign with them and proudly boast about their endorsements, and which ones do not. Because for me, the latter category actually speaks positively of those candidates, and the first one makes me quite suspicious. But what do you think? Do you trust teachers unions? Are you, especially if you're an educator, do let me know what you think in the comments. Hit that like button, yada, yada, yada. And guys, that'll be it for this episode of the Bread vs. Everyone podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please do make sure to subscribe if you aren't yet. Send in your voicemails, check out the merch. And with that, guys, we'll talk again real soon.